All right, guys, this is Lionel and Lamar back for season 1, episode 8, titled The Pointy End. So, we're going to get into a little bit of what's going on in King's Landing. I want to start there because we first see um, Ned in prison, and we get a little bit of a conversation between him and Varys, and they're kind of talking about like why Varys did or did not do anything to help Ned. So, what did you think about that scene?
I initially thought this Varys guy, I still don't like him because he brings Ned some water, and naturally Ned's like, I don't, I don't want that. Is that poison? He doesn't say it, but you can see it in his face. Um, and I'm just thinking, why are you the one to come down here? Because it seems like he shouldn't be doing that. He's down there as a courtesy to Ned for some reason, but he's going behind Cersei's back in doing it. And he's cloaked in this dark robe, and he's got this torch so that he can see because there's no light down there at all. But he even says, actually, how come nobody trusts a eunuch? And I was thinking to myself, I haven't seen any other eunuchs in this show, but I don't trust you personally. It has nothing to do with you being a eunuch.
Yeah.
You just seem sketchy. And as you said, Ned mentions, you watched my people get slaughtered. You didn't do anything. And the Varys says, well, I was unarmed. I'm not a fighter, and Lannister's army was all around killing everybody. No, I'm not going to do anything, which makes sense to me.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was wondering too. I was like, that seemed pretty logical,
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah. I'd much rather live than die. So that scene was, to me, to let Ned know that yes, your land is under siege. Your family is at risk. Arya is gone. We don't know where she is. She escaped. And Sansa is now with Joffrey, as far as what Ned knows right now.
Yeah. And so yeah, that was interesting because we see Arya make her kind of escape because Syrio Forel, her dancing teacher, notices when these Lannister guards come to retrieve her under Ned's command, quote unquote. He notices, like, why are you Lannisters here to retrieve Arya? That doesn't make any sense. And so that scene was, like, kind of interesting. And then that also led to Arya encountering a boy. And did you expect what happened with that boy to happen so quickly? Like, do you expect that moment for Arya to come this early in the show?
Okay, so she and Syrio are still practicing their sword dance. And Syrio is giving her some nuggets of knowledge. Basically, you have to use all of your senses. Um, he mentions that he's going to make this move and make that move, but instead he does something else. And because Arya was only listening and assuming that he was going to be telling the truth, when he did do the opposite of what he said, she was caught off guard and offended that he lied. And basically he said, this is battle. You're dead. It doesn't matter that I lied to you. Because you weren't paying attention to my actual moves. You weren't paying attention to my eyes. You're dead now. You can argue all you want, but if this was real, you'd be dead. And he says, you have to see, not watch. Or was it backwards? Either one.
Yeah, something like that. I think he said she wasn't seeing.
Right.
Yeah.
So they are interrupted, as you said, by the Lannister guards there to abscond with Arya, kidnap her, basically. Yeah. And Syrio gets into a fight there are 5 guards in total. There's the leader, the commander, and then 4 other soldiers. And he still has this wooden sword. I thought that was pretty cool. He like Batman's all of them. And once all four of them have been felled, that last one walks up to him, and Arya's like, "We should just go because this doesn't look good for any of us." And Sirio's like, "You know what? Just get out of here. Go be safe. I'll take care of him. I'll distract him." And he says, "What do we say to death? What do we say in the face?
Yeah,
the god of death." And Arya repeats the end of that, and it's not today. So she escapes, and she's running down the hall. And Sirio, he has his wooden sword now snapped in half by this commander who towers over him. They all did, actually, but he was even more towering, and that fight continues off scene. So she is running outside, Arya is, and she finds bodies all over the ground. They're dead, and things are knocked over. There's a cart, and she's digging through this cart looking for supplies or something. And she is approached by this young boy who also understands that there's a bounty, so to speak, on her head. So he's like, "Hey, the Lannisters looking for you. I'm going to claim my reward. Come on." And he grabs her by the shoulder, and she's like, "Get your hands off me. I'm not going anywhere." And she turns around and stabs him in the gut. And I was like, I'm completely on board.
Okay, because I was curious about that, because I was like, okay, he's kind of been expecting her to kill somebody, like pretty much since she first got Needle. And so I was really like wondering if you were prepared for it to happen so quickly like that. I mean, like with everything that's going on in King's Landing, it makes sense, but
I honestly though didn't know she had it on her.
Oh, okay.
That surprised me.
Yeah.
Like, where was it?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing about that surprised me. Now, when it did happen, there was a very slight moment for Arya where she was surprised that it had happened. She was like, "I actually just stabbed him. What John said to me was true. I need to know, or I need to be prepared to use this thing if I draw it."
Yeah. Because she did it almost instinctively.
Right.
Like, she didn't really realize it.
So the consequences of her actually using this and taking a life with it, that hit her immediately for half a second. And then she realized, oh, this is about survival.
Yeah.
And then she goes about her way.
Because she realizes, like, I'm still about to die, so I need to keep going.
Right.
So yeah, that was interesting. So on the flip side of that, we see Sansa immediately get scooped up, and she unfortunately is not able to flee in the same way that Arya does. And we see her sitting down with Cersei, and we see Cersei making her power moves again. And so, like, what did you think about that little scene with Sansa and how Cersei was kind of like trying to play stepmom to her a little bit?
We talked last episode about the naivete of Sansa, and it is annoying. I get it, I guess, and that's the character arc that that she's following. But to see her be so pitiful, to see her want to please everyone without understanding she has to take a side. She knows the truth in that Ned didn't murder Robert, and that he didn't commit treason in trying to deny Joffrey the throne.
Yeah, I don't know if he's on trial for murdering Robert. I think it's just about trying to usurp Joffrey's throne.
So,
but yeah,
she doesn't believe that that is true, and she knows in her heart, at least, that that isn't true. She's trying to convince Cersei. Why are you trying to convince Cersei of anything?
Well, I don't know if she really understands what Cersei is.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Because you're like, from your perspective, you know that Arya does know like what the Lannisters are for the most part.
Not even that. It's just, I guess I'm looking from the outside as a viewer, and from the inside as, and I guess I don't know what how Sansa views everything, as far as being a Stark and living in Winterfell.
Yes.
And Lannisters, who they are and what they represent.
Wait, you might have meant King's Landing.
Wherever they live.
Yeah. I thought you meant where the Starks are from.
No.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, King's Landing.
No.
Is where they are.
That's what I meant. Where they live.
Oh yeah, Winterfell. Sorry, yeah.
So she doesn't fully comprehend the situation that she's actually in. So for her to try and talk to Cersei in any kind of reasonable way to anyone else just seems futile. But because she's so innocent, because she has turned a blind eye to what most people would see as the truth, like she still wants to be in the good graces of Joffrey and of Cersei. So she's going to try to placate them in whatever way she can. But at the same time, she tries to exert the truth. But that doesn't matter. And for me, looking in as a viewer, I know that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But to see her fumble through all of these emotions and this exasperation, it just...
Now, you're saying that, like... So you're making points about how she's trying to please Cersei and how it's futile. But at the same time, is there an option B for her right now? Because she's pretty much a hostage, like you were just saying. They were trying to kidnap Arya to put Arya in that same exact situation that Sansa is actually in.
But Sansa doesn't know that there should be a plan B. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, so you're saying even though there isn't one, she's not even thinking about the fact that there should be one. Or like she's not even thinking about like, oh, I need to say this to them right now, but then in my bedroom I need to be thinking of something else. Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because she's definitely, like, from what she's showing us right now, we can't really tell what she's really feeling towards the Lannisters. We can't really tell that if she knows that, like, this is something that they're actually up to something bad, as opposed to just like being misunderstood about what Ned's actions were. So she's kind of trying to like she's trying to like convince them of a truth that they already know and are covering up. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so at the end of that scene, we see her writing this letter to Robb, and Cersei tells her that it's pretty much up to Robb and Sansa whether, like, Ned is freed or not, basically. And so then we see Robb getting this letter, and it's basically saying, hey, come bend the knee to Joffrey, and this will all be simpatico, will be great. So then we finally see Robb kind of take center stage. And what did you think about that, since we haven't really seen much of Robb yet? How did you think of, or what did you think of that unfolding of Robb's character a little bit?
We got a lot of Robb. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was just
it was sudden.
More. It was a
sudden.
Whole lot.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about Robb. We saw so much more than even the last 6 episodes combined, I think.
Yeah.
The last 7 episodes. So he gets this note, and he immediately says, Sansa wrote this, but this is the Queen's message.
Yeah.
He obviously knows this is a message from Cersei. And
that was actually Maester Luwin who pointed that out. But
gotcha. So he fully understands that he's being strong-armed by Cersei to give up any rights he has to defending Ned's honor and his home, basically. And he's not having any of it. He said, yeah, I'll go to Joffrey, but I'm not going alone. And what he means by that is he's taking an army, and he's going to cut some people down. So he goes and hooks up with this army. What were they called?
So he calls the Northern Banners, which basically means like everyone who's sworn to House Stark. He called them all together to go to war, basically.
So
and he's talking to the Umbers. I think might have been who you were thinking of.
In the mess hall.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're all having dinner. We're gonna call it, and the leader of
the Umbers
is sitting across the table from him, and he's kind of hostile toward Robb and his proposition, and he doesn't want. Oh no, he says that he's going to take his army, go fight this war, this battle, and then just keep the spoils for himself. And Robb's like, no, that's not happening. And what's his name? The leader?
His name is the Great John.
The Great John.
Yeah.
He says something to the effect of, you can't stop me. And Robb's wolf just comes out of nowhere, runs across the table, and bites his fingers off. Kind of like
Brand's wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Reiterating that these wolves aren't playing around.
They're not playing around.
Wolves,
and
my bad.
I am all for it. I need more of these wolves. Then we get more of the wolf. More wolves. Not necessarily Robb's. But then the Great John, he kind of makes a joke after his fingers get cut off. And he accepts that, Robb is the leader of this
Army.
Inquisition.
Yeah.
And he's going to go along with the plan now.
Yeah, and that kind of shows you a little bit about, like, how the Northerners are. They kind of, like, respect this, like, these shows of force, like, this authoritative, like, manner. And Robb, even though it was his wolf that did it, but, like, Robb kind of, like, asserted to the Great John, like, the Starks are your, like, liege lord, like, calm down.
Yeah.
And then he was like, yeah, okay, you're right. So that was pretty cool. And so right before Catelyn arrives at Robb's camp, we actually see her talking to her sister. And her sister is, she's her, and has her thing going on with her son. But her sister is refusing to help in this war. So let's talk about that a little bit. And anything else that you want to talk about with her.
Catelyn walks into the bedroom where her sister and Robin, Lysa? Lysa, her sister's name?
Lysa and Robin, yeah.
They're sitting on a bed or a couch or something, and she has this scroll in her hand, and you can tell that it's night. So she's upset a little with Lysa because this note came hours ago, and she's just now seeing it. And Lysa's response is just legendary. She says, "It was sent to me. I only showed it to you because I'm a nice person."
Right?
I thought that was hilarious.
Even though it contained information about your husband being in prison, your son going to war, your daughter being a hostage. Like,
I loved it. Because it just...
It was the pettiest thing that have heard in this whole episode.
It also just continues her complete obliviousness from the last time we saw her. And this whole time, there's more to this conversation, but Robin is clawing at her dress like, I'm hungry. I'm thinking, I forgot. He's still breastfeeding at 12 years old. I can't deal with this kid. And the whole time, also, Catelyn is looking at him like, I can't deal with this
She's
kid.
seriously looking at like, man, why are you my sister? Like, why am I even here right now?
Oh, goodness. So, Lysa sends Robin out of the room, and Catelyn and Lysa continue their discussion about what's in this note and what's transpiring at King's Landing. So, Catelyn wants Lysa to send the Knights of the Vale with her to Winterfell to help this war that's about to happen, to help Robb. And Lysa gets upset, like, no, they're going to stay here and protect their lord. And I immediately, because I was just as frustrated with her as Catelyn, I thought to myself, protect him from what? What are you talking about? But then I figured, yeah, that makes sense.
To be fair, her husband was just murdered.
Right, and then she says that. So she's still got some feelings about the Lannisters, and she doesn't trust that at any moment they're not going to come for Robin as well. So it took me a minute to calm down and process that that's a reality as well. But at first, like, Lysa, what is wrong with you? Come on now. But Catelyn, I think, also went through that same mind process or mental process.
Yeah. So
she was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to go. I can't deal with you right now. My son is literally about to go die, essentially.
Right.
So she leaves, and she does get to the camp,
Robb's camp.
And he's got several other men around, and they're discussing some things.
So I want to talk about that scene in the campsite with Robb and once Catelyn arrives.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, they meet up, they talk about the situation, they're like, hey, our family's in deep crap right now, like, it's game time. And Catelyn says, like, if you don't win in the field, like, your dad dies, I die, we all die.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you feel about, like, the stakes being up so high in that moment?
I thought that scene was very interesting because it paralleled the scene from the last episode with Tywin and Jaime.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because it was basically the same message.
It was the same conversation except with human beings.
Fair enough. Yeah, I wasn't gonna go that far, but essentially, exactly. That's pretty much what it was. And it was just a message about legacy and about, you know, and also it goes back to the title of the previous episode: "You win or you die."
Yeah.
Like, we have to win this war, or we're just gonna fade off into nothingness.
Yeah.
The whole family is gonna be, because she mentions that what happened with the Targaryens when the Lannisters took them over. Their children were murdered.
Yeah.
Like, your whole family is wiped out if you go against the Lannisters and you lose.
Yeah.
So we have to win. That's the only option.
Yeah. And so that was super interesting to me. And what was also interesting was seeing how Robb sort of addressed Catelyn and seeing how he, like, very quickly came into his own, in the sense of, like, before you would see him with Ned and Catelyn, he was just kind of being a dutiful son sort of thing. Whereas now, like, there are certain scenes in this episode where he's talking to, like, other, like, he's, like, talking war with other members of his military. For example, when they catch the Lannister spy,
Right.
And his mom is kind of trying to, like, talk him down from letting the spy go, and he's, like, looks at her like, I understand that you're my mother, but, like, no.
Yeah.
Like, and so what did you think about just, like, his, like, whole demeanor? Because he was, like, you were talking about characters switching so quickly, and, like, Robb literally switched from, like, not doing anything to being, like, this head honcho of this army.
I don't know why, but I accept this from Robb.
Okay.
And it could be that I understand he's the oldest. He's the oldest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So he's the oldest of the children of the Starks. So it doesn't bother me at all that he would put himself in a position to protect his family.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense to me. I also see the field general in him as in the way that he dresses. So I talked about how Bran looked. I talked about how Joffrey looked. Robb looks like a military commander.
Okay.
The way that he speaks, the way that he dresses, the way that he carries himself. So I don't know if I'm as turned off with this transformation. I wouldn't even call it a transformation.
Okay, so it didn't seem like as out of nowhere,
Right.
given the circumstances, basically. And also, like, his father is the only other male in the family that's, like, above him, and he's in prison.
Right.
So, I mean, he has to step
Exactly.
up right now. He does say a really interesting line. He says, "Tell Tywin Lannister that winter is coming for him." And I don't know if you've caught on, but winter is coming is the Starks family words. You know when Bran was going over, like, each of the words of each house? Well, that's the Starks words.
I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. So it was just kind of, it's always cool when those words are spoken, just because that was the title of the first episode.
Was, yeah.
So it's just kind of cool when that happens, and the different ways that it's used in the show. So now, speaking of Tywin, I want to move over to the Lannister camp, because we did see two campsites in this episode, and we see Tyrion on his way back from the Vale with Bronn. And he's talking to Bronn just about how, don't ever, like, betray me because I have a ton of money. And that's, like, his go-to thing, is, like, I have all of the monies.
Right.
And then he meets these people that are from the clan of the Vale or something like that. And so what did you think about that scene and, like, how that played out? Did that seem kind of, like, random to you? Because I know when I was watching it, I was a little bit jarred, because, like, all of a sudden he's, like, he was a prisoner, and then all of a sudden he's, like, on the road with Bronn, and then all of a sudden he's, like, surrounded by these, like, mountain people. And I was just like, there was a lot happening when I first watched it.
At this point, to be honest with you, it's going to take a whole lot to surprise me.
Gotcha.
About what's going to happen in this show.
Because it's like everything's all over the place.
All the things are happening right now. I mean, from the last episode, when it hit the fan.
Yeah.
Like, I'm expecting anything now. So it doesn't surprise me at all that, yes, he's walking around the forest and these people come after him. And they don't come after him because he's a Lannister. They don't know he's a Lannister.
Yeah, they're just like thugs, basically. Right. The equivalent of that.
So they just want to rob him and kill him just because that's what they do. So I think the only thing that kind of took me was, again, who they were, where they were from, and why they inhabited that particular land. And Tyrion actually goes into it a little bit, and that furthers his character. Basically, he knows everybody.
Yeah.
He knows about everybody.
Yeah.
He's got history on everything. So, and that's the deal he also makes with these people, the same one that he made with Bran. You know, don't kill me, and also don't kill Bran, and a quid pro quo kind of thing. I'll give you something in return.
Bronn. You were confusing me. Bronn is his friend's name. You said Bran. It's okay. That's gonna happen multiple times, I'm sure.
So he promises that land to them. It's the Vale, right?
Yeah. Which I'm thinking that was just an empty promise the entire time because they're dumb and they weren't gonna know.
Gotcha.
But I mean, I don't know that for sure.
But at the same time, the Lannisters are going to war with the Starks.
That's true.
So it makes sense that they would just come back, kill Lysa, and then give them that land too. So they then leave to...
Well, no, they kind of stick with him. And
the group.
Oh, yeah, the group. And then they march on back to Tywin's camp. Right. And we finally see Tyrion talking to Tywin, because we just got that good scene where we saw Jaime talking to Tywin. So now we get to see how Tyrion and Tywin's relationship plays out. Comparatively, how did you see this scene compared to the one with Jaime?
I got a sense for how the scene would go when they were at the top of the hill looking down at all of the tents.
Yeah.
And Tyrion says, all right, well, let's go talk to my father.
Yeah.
And he was not excited. he did not want to be a part of this conversation at all. You guys go talk to him. I'm going to hang back here.
Yeah.
So they are walking through the camp, and they get through the tent where Tywin is, and he's talking to one of his commanders about Robb and his army that is approaching from the south.
From the north.
From the north, moving south.
Yeah, they're moving south.
Something that one of the wildlings says confused me about.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, because I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And Tyrion, he walks in, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, what's up? How you doing? It's kind of cute that you would go to war for me." And Tywin's like, "Shut up! I don't want to be doing this. You forced my hand with this one.
Yeah.
Like, really? You went and got caught. Your brother Jaime, he wouldn't have got caught like this. What was the deal?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm going to war, but it's about the family, not about you. If you weren't in this family, I wouldn't be having this problem." So, and I thought it was funny that Tyrion reaches for some wine, and Tywin's like, "Nope, you can't have this." He just moves it out of the way like he's a child. So funny. But yes, there's certainly some disdain for Tyrion from Tywin. He's not having it. And Tyrion, having lived his whole life as the son of Tywin, who has not liked him for whatever reason he has, he's kind of accepted it and would rather just not be in the presence of it.
Yeah. And
you could tell that throughout the entire scene. He's even quick to say to Tywin, "Hey, these people behind me, they need a bunch of stuff. They need a bunch of armor and weapons because they didn't kill me. So take care of them, and I'm going to leave." And as that conversation is trying to end, someone comes in, and actually, this is where they learn about Robb. He says that the messenger says that Robb is moving south. And he's got 18,000 men. That's the number that they know at this moment. So Tywin says something interesting. He says the wolf is riding on the lion. He says something about...
Yeah, the wolf comes into the lion's den or something like that.
And that was the first time that... I don't know why, but episode 5, the wolf and the lion probably should have jarred this too, but that was the first time in context the families referred to themselves as these
the sigils. Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, and then we see it again when Robb is discussing it with his army. But yeah, Tywin is now headed off to meet Robb and his army.
So, given the couple of scenes we've had with Tywin, do you like? What are your thoughts on him? Because like we know how you feel about Cersei, we know how you feel about Jaime, but they come across as a little more extreme than Tywin. So I kind of wanted to get your take on him.
And I think that's it. They are, and by they I mean Jaime, Cersei, and Tywin. They're basically all the same, except that Tywin isn't as extreme.
Yeah.
Like I'm always saying that Cersei and Jaime are at 100. Tywin is at 50.
Gotcha.
He's very level-headed with everything that he is doing. Every word that he chooses is very calculated. He has a message that he needs to convey. He's going to use as least words as he can. And his actions are swift and determinate and finite. So whatever action he is going to take, it'll be the last one that deals with whatever he's trying to approach. So his mannerisms, how he treats everyone, he is like a sage, kind of. And not necessarily good versus evil kind of sage, but just a person of great wisdom who has lived through many years of, and fill in the blank there,
this game, basically. Yeah.
So he understands how to play the game.
Yeah.
He knows all the rules, and he probably wrote some of them. So he just seems very methodical. And
gotcha.
I don't necessarily see him as a villain as much as I do Cersei and Jaime.
Interesting. Okay. That's cool. So, because it's interesting because when I first was introduced to Tywin, I don't really know what I thought about him. Like, I think because, like you were just saying, Cersei was so villainous and she was just so, like, in your face about everything she was doing. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, I'm gonna focus my attention on this craziness that's happening. I didn't really pay much attention to what Tywin was doing until later seasons. But yeah, like, I just it's just interesting because there's just a lot with him.
And
so
also, it was mentioned in one of our comments on the last video, that scene where he's skinning.
Yeah.
It's a stag, which is the sigil.
Yeah.
Of the Starks.
No, the Baratheons.
The Baratheons. Yeah. So it was kind of foreshadowing that he's getting ready to just wipe out all of that
the Baratheons.
Family.
Yeah. Interesting. Did someone comment that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's cool. And yeah, so like also the in the very first episode, the wolf that was like killed by the stag or whatever that had all the puppies, like that could have been seen as foreshadowing of like conflict between them. So I mean, there's a lot of that in here. It's interesting that someone mentioned that, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on. It's pretty cool. So I actually want to talk about some of the things that happened in Winterfell right before Robb left. So he's saying goodbye to Bran. And he tells Bran a couple of things. One of the things he says to him is, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. And so, does that, like, kind of tell you anything about the North or anything like that, as far as, like, how the Starks are rooted in that area? Or did that really speak to you at all?
It did, but that's kind of a theme that I've heard in other stories, whether it be a movie or in a book or any other series, where there is this one particular family that does rule over everything, and that presence always has to be there.
Gotcha.
And it doesn't matter necessarily the age or a skill level or ability or, their place in that family. As long as that person is there, that family is there. So it made sense that that's the message Robb would convey to Bran, and I fully accepted it. And it makes sense that it would work that way.
Yeah. And also, like, that that scene was doubly important because we were just talking about how Robb stepped into his role once Ned was imprisoned. But Jon is not a legitimate Stark. So Bran is the next oldest male child of the Starks. Mm-hmm. So I think that was like Robb sort of like telling Bran like, hey, we both are having to like kind of move up a little bit on the rung here, and like this is like what your duty is. My duty right now is to go and help Father. So I don't know. I thought that was like a really touching moment. But then we had a little bit of a weird moment where we are introduced to Rickon, who we haven't really seen much of before. Did you even know there was another Stark?
I did.
Oh, okay.
So it was probably the first episode.
The first episode, yeah.
Where all of the Starks are standing before Robert. I noticed that the smallest boy there. Well, he walks in and Bran asks him, "What are you doing? Get back to your room," or something like that. And he Rickon.
Yeah.
He has this bewildered look on his face, and Bran says, "Don't worry, Robb's gonna go fight this war, bring back Mom and Dad. Everything's gonna be cool." And Rickon, he's like, no, they won't. And then he walks out. Like, who are you? What experience do you have that would make you want to say that? Like, why are you in such despair already?
Yeah.
About this situation? Has this happened before? Is somebody speaking to you? Do you know the future? Why is he upset about this? Like, why is he doubting the situation? It was so weird. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, he is a very small boy. Like, Bran's a young boy, but, like, Rickon's super tiny. So, I mean, like, all he saw was his entire family just left. So, I mean, I think it makes sense to be a little bit, like, I don't know. Like, pessimistic about the situation.
He would have to already have some abandonment issues.
Gotcha.
To assume that when people leave, they're not coming back.
Gotcha.
I don't know where he got the impression that it was a futile effort on their part.
Gotcha.
They were all going to die.
Okay.
I don't understand. So, he said it, and then he walked away, and I guess that's all we needed to see of him. Fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just thought that whole scene was just like really moving to me, just because I really like Robb and I really like Bran, like both of those characters, and so it was cool to finally get to see them like have some more meaningful stuff going on. So now I want to talk about Jon at the Wall. Not a whole lot happened with Jon, but we did get to see him fight a zombie. They're called Whites, but you don't need to know
White
that right
Walkers.
now. White Walkers and Whites are different.
Gotcha.
But all of that will be explained. But so we finally get to see Jon fight a White. And it's really, I don't know, how did you feel about that scene? Because it's the first time, like, the actual, like, zombie threat has, like, reappeared since the very first episode. And that was, like, a couple of minutes, so.
Jon has been sent to his quarters for insubordination. And it's nighttime by now, and his wolf Ghost starts howling and whimpering, and it alerts Jon, and he asks, Ghost, what's wrong? Somebody out there? So Ghost is clawing at the door. So Jon grabs his belt, it's got his swords on it, and he opens the door, and Ghost runs through the encampment, and he is followed by Jon, and he reaches the commander. What's his commander's name? Mormont reaches his quarters, and he's clawing at that door. And Jon immediately is worried, like, hey, is there something wrong? He knocks on the door. He finally opens the door, and he walks through, and he doesn't see anything. And he calls out the commander's name a couple of times, sees another door past the front door that's ajar, and he's calling into that room, trying to figure out if anything's wrong. Well, the door behind him closes, and we see this huge zombie-looking thing, and it comes at him. And the White, and Jon, they tussle for a minute. Jon chops off the hand of one of them, and this thing is super strong, and picks him up by his neck and has him against the wall, and Jon stabs him in the gut, and he falls down. At that moment, the commander reveals himself, and for a split second, he and John have a conversation. But you notice in the background that this white has awakened again. He wasn't really dead; he just fell to the ground. So he comes back to life, or whatever we're gonna call it, and the commander's holding this lantern, and John grabs it and throws it on him and sets him on fire, and then that finally does extinguish him. That's ironic, but I'm gonna go with it. And then he asks John does ask the commander, like, what just happened? What's going on? That thing. So we had seen them already because two of those bodies had shown up earlier that day.
Yeah.
And one of them was missing a hand. So in the last episode, that hand was brought back to the camp, and it was assumed to be what's his uncle's name?
Benjen.
It was assumed to be Benjen's, but now we know that it wasn't Benjen's. And then it's questioned, did you find Benjen or any of his men? The answer was no. So we see those two again, but we see one of these things again, and one of them is alive. And it was super weird because I don't know what they are or why they're doing any of the things that they're doing. It didn't necessarily surprise me that they popped up, or that it popped up, and that it was fighting him, and that it was super strong, and that it was unkillable, except for being set on fire. Yeah. Because, and it's been sprinkled throughout these first 8 episodes of these mythical creatures, and we even talked about it a couple of times, so I'm not surprised that there are these otherworldly creatures that are harassing these people.
Yeah, and so, like, when you watch the show, like, are you in it for more of the fantasy sort of things, or are you in it for more of the, like, the war and the, like, political intrigue, or is it all kind of, like, meshing together for you?
Right now, it's more about the characters.
Okay.
And Ned, Bran, Arya, Cersei, Tyrion. I could actually list all of them, but getting to know all of these people, all of their convictions, their values, their motivations, their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and desires, understanding why they are here.
Yeah.
And what they are doing, what they want. That's really where I am right now. And I guess that ties into the political intrigue and the wars and the battle and things like that. The fantasy side of it, aside from Daenerys and these dragon eggs, that's all that I care about.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Anything else, I'll just let the show teach me about and show me what's going on.
Because, yeah, like, I think at this point, like you just said, like, the biggest fantasy elements are the kind of ice creatures in the north and Daenerys and her dragon eggs. But, yeah, so, okay, that does make a lot of sense. So now I actually do want to start talking about Daenerys. We see the very first instance we see of her is Drogo making good on his promise, pretty much. And he is looting and raiding these villages and things like that so that they can save up money in order to buy ships, which answers your question. Yeah. But he's trying to buy ships in order to go ahead and take the 7 kingdoms for his wife. But you're kind of seeing Daenerys have this conflict, like this inner conflict of like, well, this is what I wanted, and you did literally say you were going to do these things, but it's kind of vile and violent. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Daenerys sees the pillaging. She sees the raping, and she sees people literally being set on fire, and she gets this worried look on her face, this disgusted look on her face. And then she also noticed specifically that there is this group of women who are basically fenced in. And there are 2 or 3 other soldiers, Dothraki soldiers, kind of clawing at them. And there's one of them outside of this cage-like thing, and she's on the ground screaming and struggling with one of the other soldiers who's about to mount her. That's what they call it. So Daenerys looks on, like, I need that to stop. And Jorah responds to her like, no, they're not going to stop. That's how this goes. This is the spoils of war. This woman is their reward. They get to have her. And Daenerys is like, no, they don't actually, because I'm queen. So I'm telling you to make that stop. And Jorah again goes, I don't know if we can do that. I mean, look at them.
Right?
They're doing it. I don't know if we can stop them. And I think even one of the other Dothraki behind her, they also protest. And she says, well, if you don't stop them right now, when we go back, I'm going to tell Khal Drogo that this didn't happen and you didn't follow my orders. So that kind of puts a fire under them, and they go stop it. And Jorah says, you can't claim all of them. And Khaleesi says, well, I'm going to. So they get back to where Drogo is. And he's heard about all of this commotion. And he says, why, what happened here? I'm being told that you told them they can't have their victory, their reward. These women are slaves now. That's how this works. And Khaleesi's like, yeah, that's exactly what happened, and I stopped it. I claimed many daughters today. And Drogo, he listens on, like, okay, tell me more, my moon.
That's what he calls my life. Yes. Isn't that cute?
It is.
And she says my sun and stars.
Yeah,
it's so adorable.
So it's funny. It's adorable, but it seems like a mouthful. But
oh, to be saying that like every time you see them. Yeah.
And it was like after every sentence they would say it. Like, okay, that's fine. I accept it.
Because like in our society, we shorten things to like letters.
Yeah, like we abbreviate everything. They're like, nope. Every astronomical body out there, we're gonna name it.
My wonderful celestial body.
So she's explaining that there's a need for compassion, basically, and one of Drogo's soldiers, he kind of protests what Khaleesi is saying. He's like, no, this is nonsense. You're a foreigner. Why am I even listening to you? And she talks back to him and goes, I'm Khaleesi. I will command you. You will do as I say. And he kind of spits at her. And he's like, no. And he pulled his sword on her. And I was like, we just saw this.
Twice.
Like, why did you think this is a good idea? And Drogo's looking on like, oh, what are you doing there? So Khaleesi steps back and Drogo stands up. And this soldier is now challenging Drogo personally. Like, if you're going to take orders from this foreigner, this trash, basically, you don't deserve to be king. And he, like, I'm going to cut you down because you're not worthy. And Drogo, I'm like, this is not going to end well for you. And I was waiting for it. Like, I'm on board for whatever Drogo's about to do because I know it's going to be awesome. And it was. So, the soldier has his sword drawn, and all the other soldiers around him that are also looking on like, bro, what are you doing? They're approaching him, and Drogo's like, no, I got this. It's okay. And he steps to the soldier, and the soldier puts his sword on Drogo's shoulder, or his chest, and Drogo just walks into it and cuts himself deeper than what had initially pierced his skin. And he's just basically taunting this soldier, like, if you really want the throne, you're gonna have to come through me. And I'm not afraid of you. And he is getting riled up more and more and more. And he says, I'm not gonna burn your body. I'm not gonna give you that honor. I'm not gonna bury you. Beetles will eat your eyeballs. And he says something about the rain will wash away your blood from your bones. And he's basically saying, I'm going to end you in the most brutal of ways, and everyone's going to know, first of all, not to do this, and that you're an idiot for ever talking to me or Khaleesi like this. So he kind of just dances around the ring with him, taunting him, and finally the soldier says, you know what, you have to kill me first before any of that's going to happen. And Drogo's like, well, I just did. And he slits his throat with his own sword. And then he reaches into this cut on his throat, rips out his esophagus and his tongue, and throws it onto this pile of bodies. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what should have happened. Because you're an idiot. Why? I don't understand. Why? I guess it needed to happen. But I can't believe that however long the Dothraki people have been around, however many kings have existed, where someone would just blatantly disrespect the Cole like that and get away with it. Like, what did he think was going to happen? Like, you're going to die.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I would imagine that it's something that probably just happens. People probably, because, like, Daenerys says something at the beginning, or no, actually Viserys tells her this, that Khal Drogo's never been defeated in battle, and that's why his braid is so long. So, I mean, like, I think challenging Khal is just something that happens. It's just no one's ever beaten Khal Drogo before.
Gotcha.
I think that, but, like, that culture is, like, that's what they do. They challenge each other when they're upset about something. And, like, it didn't make sense, but, like, him seeing this foreigner, like, kind of, like, changing their customs and stuff. Like, I think that was probably in his mind a big enough thing to be like, you can't just like, well, he can obviously, but he was like, I think he was thinking like, this person is just coming here and changing everything that we do, and you're just letting it happen. So, I mean, it made sense.
It did, you're right.
Yeah.
However, I would have liked him to have like 2 or 3 other people agree with him first.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. If there had been like a little bit of a mutiny or something, that makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah, and all the same though, Drogo ends that guy, and it's awesome. Fantastic. But then we see Mirri Maz Duur, who is this lady that we've been introduced to, that Khaleesi kind of saved from being raped and attacked. We see her show up, and the Dothraki are not taking kindly to her, but she's not married to Drogo, so it doesn't matter. But Khaleesi still is like, hey, no, she's one of my daughters now. Like, we're going to let her speak. And she agrees to help Khal Drogo. She actually insists that she's allowed to help Khal Drogo nurse his wounds back together. So what do you think of this, like, horde of women that Khaleesi has just, like, acquired, pretty much?
Well, it's interesting that she, first of all, did it. I didn't know that was a thing. So, yeah, she's allowed to just adopt children. I accept it. It's fine. I just never seen it.
Yeah.
So, and of this group of women that she has adopted as her daughters, we just get to know this one of them, who happens to be a healer of sorts. So, I mean, I accept that it happened. I'm curious where it goes from here. Yeah. I mean, hopefully it does go somewhere. You don't have to say anything, obviously. But for that to be a one-time event, or if we never hear about these women or even this healer again, at least, hopefully this is a stepping stone to how Khaleesi is going to behave in the future. Is she going to do other things similar to
like this sort of like maternal instinct that just kind of kicked in there? Okay, I feel you. That makes sense. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is head back over to King's Landing to end it off. We see this older man being dismissed from the Kingsguard, basically, and we're seeing like a lot of maneuvering from Cersei, and it's kind of hilarious because she's like dismissing this person because he is too old, basically, is what Joffrey says. But then she also slides in there, and Jaime is going to be the new Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. So, and also when Tywin and Tyrion are talking, Tywin says, yes, Joffrey rules in King's Landing now. And Tyrion's like, you mean Cersei rules in King's Landing now? And Tywin just kind of like, yeah. So, like, Lannisters are in full takeover mode right now. Like, what do you think about that?
First, I want to again address this little boy whose mom put him on this chair. He still looks like that.
Yeah.
Even though he's got his official robe and his actual crown. He's sitting up. I don't know why Cersei even allows him to look like this, but he's slouched over to one side. He doesn't look very interested. He's being addressed by the people, and they're reading off official decrees, and he's just kind of he has this unearned, and he's had it the whole time, the whole show, but the sense of entitlement that is different than how we perceive it in modern times. It's probably 100 times worse, and because I understand that he knows he's a Lannister, he knows that he is king now, and I guess this is just their version of what entitlement looks like, and it's just so annoying coming from him. I don't know why. Anyway.
But I mean, is it really entitlement? Because like what we would think of is like a spoiled child or something, but this is the actual like king as far as like anyone is concerned in this kingdom.
To me, from the outside, even though he is technically in line for it, he's acting as if he's done something more than be born to have earned it.
Gotcha. But I mean, if you're putting yourself in that time frame, like you don't have to do anything but be born.
That's just what it looks like.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So again, I understand that he knows he's a Lannister. I get it. But just watching him act this way.
It's interesting because like he has the same sort of mannerisms that Robert has, and like he has the same kind of slouch that Robert has, I feel like, except like you were saying, he hasn't done anything to earn that. I think that that's really the key difference. But like I do see a lot of like, I mean, Robert obviously wasn't like petulant in this way, but like it makes sense that Joffrey would sit on that throne and think, oh well, now I can just do whatever I want, because that's literally what Robert was doing. So in that respect, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, he doesn't know what being king means.
Yeah, so and he doesn't know like all of the. Robert at least was smart enough to like understand that there were people who needed to be doing certain things in certain areas, and that he needed to make sure at least that they were doing those things, even though he was essentially doing nothing. But Joffrey is just like sitting on this throne, and his mom is just oblivious to whatever his mom is doing.
And that's really what it's about. He doesn't have to understand anything because his mom is understanding it for him.
Gotcha.
Cersei is making all the moves, as you said, putting her family at the top and making sure that they do have the upper hand in this conflict that's going on right now. And it started, well, in this episode anyway, it started with Sansa and making sure that she was the one to deliver the message to the rest of her family, like, hey, all the Starks are okay with this. Come over here and just show it.
Yeah.
Putting her brother in charge of the army. What's it called?
Oh, what he called the banners, but I mean it's just
no.
Oh, putting Jamie in charge of the Kingsguard.
Yeah. So she is definitely on her way to making sure that all of her chess pieces are exactly where they need to be to counter anyone else who might challenge her.
So to wrap it up, what do you see as the next move in Cersei and Ned's power play?
Well, first of all...
Or do you even think it is between Cersei and Ned anymore?
I still do. However, I'll call him Ned's knight, Robb.
Okay.
And I'll call Catelyn... She might be the bishop. I don't want to say queen because she's not all powerful. She can't do anything.
Yeah.
She might be the bishop. However, what I'm saying is Robb has to make a move first.
Gotcha.
Robb has to get him out of prison.
Okay.
That battle needs to be won first before Ned can figure out where all of his pieces are and what the next move needs to be.
Gotcha.
So, depending on the outcome of Robb's conflict with Tywin. That's kind of going to determine what Ned does next.
Okay, so you're thinking like the ball is kind of in the Stark's corner right now.
Oh, absolutely.
There. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, if you don't.
Sorry, no, there is something.
Yeah.
Bran is sitting by this tree.
Yes.
Talking to that
the
wildling.
Yeah.
And she walks up and says to him, "They can hear you. They're speaking to you. They're answering you." And Bran looks at her like, "What are you talking about?" And she talks about the gods and how Robb isn't going to get any help from them where he's going. And she says something about they can't help what they can't see and that their eyes have been gouged out.
Yeah.
What was she talking about?
So basically, she's referring to those trees, and how there's like little faces carved into them. So those are the trees of the old gods. The reason that they make this difference, and you kind of see this with Sam, how he said that his family keeps the new gods, the Faith of the Seven. In the South, the Faith of the Seven has kind of taken over in the way that like Christianity has kind of emerged over like more pagan type gods or whatever in our world. And so in the South, that's like the Faith of the Seven is basically like the dominant religion, and they have like completely gotten rid of everything that like is reminiscent of the old gods down there. And so that was what she meant, is like once he crosses this certain threshold, he's in Faith of the Seven territory. So if you're a religious person, you wouldn't think that the Starks are gonna have like as much luck there, because like their gods aren't there to save them, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was episode 8. Thank you guys for joining us once again. Remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to us. And we will see you guys next time for season 1, episode 9.